My name is Christian Lucas. I'm the Environmental Health Director here for Contra Costa County. I'm joined by our Assistant Director, Veronica Burrell, and Takia Foster, who's going to be helping to essentially work everything that's going on here behind the scenes, as well as Alma Cruz Gomez, who is assisting us as well. And yes, another county employee here in case there are any technical questions about any of our accounting. But the reason that we're all here today is to discuss the proposed fee schedule that you all hopefully received a letter and an email from our office at the end of last month that sort of kicked off a 30-day public comment period that we're sort of near the tail end of now. But we wanted to host this and answer any questions that you all may have for both the benefit of you and then anybody that is joining us here virtually as well. Just to let you know, the meeting is being recorded and we do intend on posting this webinar online in case there are those that were not able to either join us here in person or on the Zoom link because of some scheduling conflicts or whatever reason that they can view it at their leisure. And with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? Next slide, please. Okay, so environmental health. You might be wondering, why are we charging all these permit fees and what are you actually paying for? Well, in environmental health, we cover a lot of different things. And I'm not going to go through everything on this slide. You all can read it. It will be available online. We're also going to post the slide deck as well so you can have access to it. But the main program areas that we regulate and permit here are those 5 that you see: food safety, recreational health, land use, solid waste, and other consumer protection programs. It encompasses a lot of public health and safety inspections at local businesses and private residences throughout the county every year. And these are things like restaurants, retail markets, swimming pools, tattoo parlors, medical waste generators like a doctor's office or a dentist's office, to small water systems, and a variety of other businesses and entities that we end up regulating. It totals about an average of 15,000 inspections across all of our staff every single year. It's a lot of service that we provide out to the community, both on the permitting and compliance side. As you can imagine, when we go into a restaurant, we are there to make sure that rules are being followed so that consumers and patrons don't end up getting sick. And that sort of covers most of the programs that we regulate here. The real purpose of everything that we do and the services that we provide is to keep consumers safe from illnesses. And it could be consuming any number of things, whether it's food, recreating in water bodies, drinking water, or even the natural environment that we all enjoy every day. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry.
Yes, you're in the right place. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so why are we doing this? I think that's a common question that I've certainly got asked over the last several months. And realistically, I don't want to sugarcoat it, but costs have increased since the last time that we adjusted our fees. Last time we adjusted our fees was 2019, as you can see on the slide. And there have been significant increases across the board. I'm sure I don't have to mention that to anyone here. You guys are all likely small business owners. And you know that cost for both services and supplies have all gone up. Same is true for us here in local government. Currently, across all of the division, the current fees that we have are only covering about 73% of our program costs, which naturally leads to a bit of a deficit. And I should mention that unlike other county departments, environmental health is funded in really 3 ways, I guess. Permit fees, grants that we receive from various entities like the state of California and the federal government, as well as a tonnage fee that is paid to us by the local solid waste operators. So anything that you put in your garbage can at home or in any of the garbage receptacles throughout the county, any waste that's produced here and gets deposited here in our landfill goes through a scale house, and the amount, there's a board-approved rate that we, as what's called a local enforcement agency for solid waste, essentially receive in order to fund that particular program. Those are really the 3 cost recovery mechanisms that we have here in environmental health. And like I said, we're only receiving about 73% across all of our programs based on the current fees that you all paid most recently, I believe, in We did billing in what, February, Parna? And then those came due sometime in March. So what that leaves us is about a $3.1 million shortfall or deficit at the end of the projected budget year. And so we need to adjust these fees in order to continue protecting public health and providing the services that we do throughout the community. And realistically, in order to make our entire business, because functionally that's what we are. I know we are an arm of the government, but we are running a business here, to remain effective and sustainable in the long term if we want those services to continue. And some of those services are state mandated, meaning there are laws that are passed up to the state legislature that require programs that we then need to fund in order to provide those services that the state is telling us that we have to. Next slide. Okay, so what's changing? Wanted to give you guys sort of an overview, and granted, there's only like 3 things here, so I'm just giving you a very high-level overview. For those of you that have not had a chance yet, I encourage you to read the executive summary, at least, of that fee study that I put in there. That does a pretty good job of sort of telling you everything that happened with regard to this particular fee study, but I'm going to highlight a few of the things that we did here today. And so one of the things that we did was we updated categories. So we've received a lot of feedback over the years of how our structure, our fee categories, our permit categories, if you will, could be better aligned with current practices. And that goes sort of across the gamut, across programs. So this includes, adding new categories for mobile food carts, revising the way that we permit temporary events, certified farmers markets, our pools, and our schools, as we do inspections for retail food at all of the schools. For those of you that have children or grandchildren, we are there every year, multiple times a year, making sure that students have safe food to eat as well. What we hope, and I say this with a grain of salt because I know anything that comes from the government is not necessarily simple, but we're trying to simplify our structure based on recommendations from a third-party consultant. And I think that's really important to note here is in previous fee studies, we have done those ourselves. And I'm here to tell you that I'm not an accountant. I'm an environmental health director, and so I know how to administer environmental health programs. And so we actually used a third-party consultant that is a government financial auditing firm to perform the study that was presented to all of you. And based on that study, they're recommending some changes and some updates to our various fee categories. And again, not going to sugarcoat it. In most categories, those fees are going up. It's not to say all of them are going up, because we do have some categories that are going down. But for the vast majority of you, it means the fees are probably going up, and that's probably why you're all sitting here. And then, of course, we want to make sure that the calculations that form the basis of that fee study are transparent, so that you all know how we're coming up with this information. And again, we use a third-party consultant in order to come up with those, as we're not sort of done here in-house. And there are various tables outlined outside of that executive summary in that fee study that I encourage you all to look at. It sort of gives you a nice overview of sort of money that's being spent, expenditures that the division has, and then how we sort of get to our fully burdened hourly rate, which I'll kind of get into because I know that's a bit of a mouthful. Next slide, please. Okay, so the fee development process. Again, I know that 89-page or 90-page document is a bit much, and I get it. And so I kind of want to go category by category to try to explain what happened in there. And again, I'm doing this very high level. If you have any specific questions, I'm more than happy to get into that. But I also don't want to bore anybody who doesn't really care about that. The first thing that we did, or that we asked the consultants to do, was to do a time study. Every inspection that's done, generally every activity that our field staff do here is tracked in our data management system down to the 5-minute increment. So we have very good time tracking data to know how long it takes us to perform various services that we execute here in this particular office. We gave our consultant about 3 fiscal years worth of data, 2018-19, 19-20, and then we skipped sort of the pandemic time because we were doing a lot of other things during that time that we didn't want to use to have to skew the data, and then also 21 and 22. You might be asking yourself, well, hey, I thought the pandemic started in 2020. The time ranges that I'm using there, or the date ranges I'm using there rather, correspond to our permit year. So for those of you that have our permits that are on a permit year basis, it goes from March 1st of a given year to February 28th or 29th of the following year. COVID really ramped up in the United States in March of 2020. So again, our permit year stopped before that happened, or we stopped giving the data over to our consultant before that happened, and then we sort of left out that time period so as to not skew the data. And essentially that was used to establish an average amount of time spent per year on each individual service activity we do. So you can think of those as the individual fee categories or permit categories that you have. And then within those categories, there are a variety of activities that our staff perform. And each one of those, again, is tracked down to the 5-minute increment. So we gave all that data to them. They analyzed to try to figure out and tell us how much time does it actually take for you to administer these programs. Next, that fully burdened hourly rate. I know that price that you saw there on the previous screen, that $376 per hour amount. I don't want you to think that any one of us here is receiving that in our pockets or in our paychecks at the end of the year. That's not what it is. Essentially, what the fully burdened hourly rate is two things. It's the direct costs for services, and it's also the indirect costs. You need both of those pieces of data in order to develop this. The direct costs are those that specifically relate to an activity or a service. Essentially, it's the real time that it takes for our staff to provide that service. You can think of the inspections that are done out in the field, also the stuff that happens when they write inspection reports and do other things here in the office. Then there's also those indirect costs. Those are things that support the services that we offer. And I say that in general, but cannot be directly or easily assigned to a particular program category. These would be things like keeping the lights on, making sure that the telephones work, the supplies, pens, paper, all that stuff, copy machines, printers, all the stuff that it goes to essentially make the business run and support everybody that's here. That is also folded into that amount. So that's why I say the folks that go out and visit your business, or those of us here, we're not pocketing, we're not making, an attorney's rate at $367 an hour. That is what it costs to essentially run the entire business. And that's what all of the permit fees are based off of, so that all those indirect costs are essentially split amongst all of the fee payers, which is what, I'll get into it here. That's what the permit fees are based off of. And then I guess the second piece of the fully burdened hourly rate is how much staff time do we have in order to provide those services? So we have a number of inspection staff that work here. They all are, 40-hour-a-week employees. So we can pretty much gauge how much time, less, vacation and sick leave and holiday time, weekends that they have in a given year to provide the services to all of you as regulated businesses. And essentially, and I encourage you to go back to the executive summary and some of those tables in the fee study to see this calculation, but there is a table in there that shows that basically the amount of available labor hours for each of the program categories, or I should say the fee for providing all of the services, divided by the available labor hours is essentially how you come to that fully burdened hourly rate. I know it seems complicated, and maybe I didn't do it justice explaining it, but I would say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and there is a table in there that illustrates this pretty clearly, and I would encourage you to look at that if what I'm saying to you here today didn't quite make as much sense for you. And then finally, we have the time it takes, we have the fully burdened hourly rate, now we have permit fees. That's how we essentially distribute this across all of our rate or our fee payers. The fully burdened hourly rate is essentially applied to each individual fee category. So all of the permit fees that you pay for, that fully burdened hourly rate is multiplied by the average amount of time that the consultant deemed it takes us to administer that particular activity, to come up with whatever the permit fee should be for that particular activity. That's illustrated in all those appendices at the end of our fee study. And we are putting together a simplified version of that where you can see for each fee category, whether it's yours or not, what the previous price was, and then what the current price is. That way you don't have to delve into all those appendices, because I know there are quite a few. Any questions on that from anybody here in the room or online. Online, I'm looking.
No questions online. We do have someone.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for the difficulty. Yes, question.
I just have a question about the time study. So when you're looking at, say, inspections, for example, different inspectors take different times to do an inspection. So how is that averaged out? Is it, like, how do you figure that out? Because some inspectors are very fast, some inspectors are very slow. Some, also because of like the type of inspection that they're doing. So I'm just kind of curious how that, how you weigh that against the time study.
Yeah, so I think you said it essentially is we average it out. So we have a number of inspectors that perform these inspections across our division. And what we do is we average their time. So such that, one person's time is not being used to calculate that particular fee or for that particular fee category more so than the other one. Now, what I will say in doing that is it will fluctuate. And we try to do this as frequently as we can. And our goal moving forward is to do this more frequently than we have done in the past, such that any of those changes, whether it be somebody taking longer to do an inspection or even shorter to do an inspection, are reflected in whatever we end up bringing to our board for adoption. And maybe I should have addressed that at the beginning. This proposed fee study and the proposed set of fees is just that, it's proposed. We cannot charge those fees until the fee schedule has been adopted by our Board of Supervisors. They're the ones that essentially control the rates or the fees, the permit fees that we charge. But we average the time. And then we also, and this is part of the last piece that I hadn't gotten to yet, but maybe this will help answer the question, is we do an internal review. So we have management staff within the division, as well as myself and our assistant director, who look over the amount of time that the consultants had given back to us to say, this is how long it takes. And we then have the ability to fine tune and make tweaks, because if something seems way out of the norm or something that's more than we feel like it should take, we have the ability to adjust that. I will say we didn't do that for everything, but we did do that for some things, because some things were just entirely, too far out of, whatever the standard deviation should be for the amount of time it should take.
Thank you for answering my question. Just a quick follow-up. Is that meeting agended yet for the County Board of Supervisors? Do you have a date for that meeting yet?
We are targeting May 20th, and it will be a noticed public hearing. Our goal is to put all of this information up on our website in the same place that you found to register for this workshop today, as well as to get that fee study. We will put that out there. It will also be published by the clerk of the board as well. And it's a public hearing. So the Board of Supervisors will want to hear from any interested individuals on, what they should or should not do. Some folks might have already reached out to their individual board offices, which is great. But there will also be an opportunity at the board meeting as well to voice your concern or opposition there as well. Yes, sir.
At any time, did you discover through this process with the contractor and yourselves and your evaluation of everything that you do, did you ever uncover any ways that you could save money, be more efficient, and actually reduce some costs?
Sure. Yeah. And you'll see that reflected in again, some of the fee categories. It's not necessarily across the board, but absolutely. I'll give you an example of our recreational health fees. A few of those fees are actually going down. And the reason they're going down is because we've made changes within our program that have created efficiencies where we're not spending as much time doing inspections because of different ways in which we're evaluating equipment on site, or different ways in which we are evaluating the chemistry of the water. That's taking less time, which then allows us to, again, reduce those fees when we go through this process of seeing how long it takes us to administer a program. And so you will see fluctuations throughout that document. Like the vast majority of the fees, and I don't want to sugarcoat it, are going up, but there are several categories throughout that document where they are going down, and they represent efficiencies that have been gained over the years that are then reflected in the amount of time it takes. I don't know if that answered your question, but an attempt.
I didn't hear any words on eliminating middle management or anything like that. There's didn't seem any bloodshed involved. So I'll maybe,
We have not eliminated any middle management, but I will say we have also not hired any in a great number of years.
okay.
So, yeah, that's the thing. Yes, sir.
My situation and question probably does not apply to 99% of everybody else's situation. I have managed a domestic water supply from a well for the last 35 years.
Small water system, I assume?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the only thing I'm aware that the county has done for me is cash my checks.
Yes,
That good?
I hear you.
2 visits in 40 years.
So if I could, I'm going to address that question in particular towards the end. So if we could hold to the end, I'd be more than happy to address that. Or are we okay with that? Okay, great. Okay, I think I'm done with this slide. If we could move on to the next. Adjusting my own. Oh, and we're to the point where I'm going to address some of those things. So as I mentioned before, we're sort of in the midst or towards the tail end of a 30-day public comment period. And as you can imagine, our office has already received a number of comments and questions from the regulated community. And so what we thought would be helpful would be to answer some of those questions here today, because they might be some of the questions that you have yourself before we open it up to additional questions. More than happy to take those. So feel free to prompt me again if I don't touch your question, but I'm hoping to. So for the first one, we've been asked, and I should say, we've received numerous questions from our regulated community. And what we've tried to do here on 2 slides is sort of group those into about 6 basic categories of the types of questions that we've received. So it might not address your specific situation, but we're attempting to give sort of a broad brush overview of that. But if we don't, feel free to ask. That's why we're here today. The first one, how will the additional funds be used? And like I said, it's all of the funds and all of the point of the fee study is to cover the inspection costs of operating this particular office. And so that's going to go to covering those inspections and other investigations that are around that, re-inspections, re-placard inspections if you are a restaurant, in addition to the administrative support and then ensuring compliance with all the regulations that we have to do. So it's not as though we're not trying to make money here. We're trying to cover the cost of running our division. And as you saw on that first or second slide, we're only recovering about 73% right now, which is why we need to raise to meet the current needs. Second question, how do our fees compare to neighboring counties? If any of you have taken a look, I certainly have. Our fees are higher, but that's a bit nuanced, and I kind of want to touch on that a little bit right now. Based on the research that I've done thus far, our neighboring counties haven't yet done the same thing that we've done, which is evaluating our fees or their fee schedules at this particular point in time. So while ours might be higher now, that's not to say that they will always be higher. This happens throughout the state, throughout the nation, quite frankly, where folks are constantly playing catch up with what their budgeted expenses are. And you see that with varying agencies, varying when and if they go to their board requesting fee schedule changes. For a lot of our neighboring counties, that hasn't happened yet. For us, we feel the need at this particular point in time that we need that to happen in order for us to continue providing those services, like I mentioned. 3, why are fees increasing so much? And is a payment plan available? As I think I mentioned previously, our fees haven't increased since 2019. That's been about 6 years. Realistically, we should probably be adjusting fees more frequently than that so that the swings are not quite as large. And we certainly understand that. We've heard that from the regulated community, and we are definitely taking that back, and we'll make adjustments moving forward. Since 2019, I think as we kind of touched on at the beginning, in particular here in environmental health, our labor costs have risen by about 20%. Speaking for most governmental agencies, the single largest expenditure, and I say most because it's not always, but generally speaking, the single largest expenditure is labor costs. And ours have gone up. Ours have gone up quite substantially. And so now we're having to essentially look at and evaluate all of our fee programs and our permit programs to adjust accordingly. And in terms of payment plans currently aren't available. If we've ever had payment plans available here. So I hope that answers any questions that might be here. You can move on to the next slide. We'll go ahead and continue on. There's only 3 more before we open it up. So can the increase be phased in over multiple years? This is a question that we received repeatedly. And the answer to that is yes. We're currently evaluating how to best do this and how we can do this and still maintain the level of service with a potential deficit, at least initially, if we do this phased increase. And so what we're looking at is the businesses that are most affected and the most that are affected. And for that, it's our retail food program. We permit about 4,500 retail food facilities throughout the county. That makes up the vast majority of the permitted businesses that we regulate. And so what we're looking at for those is a 2-year phased increase. We're not entirely sure the exact mechanism of how that will work, but when we eventually go to our board for adoption, that will be one of the proposals. And again, not to sugarcoat anything, but this will put us in a bit of a deficit, at least initially, but we're looking at some creative ways that we can use things like vacancies in order to accommodate that and adjust for that in our budget. Also, speaking specifically to the state or the small water system question, we are also looking at that because we do recognize that those fees are quite substantial and might be the most substantial in the entire fee study for those of you that have looked into it. And there are a variety of things that we're looking at. One of which is whether or not we maintain local control of that program or local regulatory authority, which we've been delegated by the state of California to do, or whether that program should go back to the state, which would likely mean that you're going to see differences in the amounts that you're going to be paying. But again, that's not necessarily a question that is just affecting you. That's going to affect everyone throughout the entire county. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be asking our board when we go with this proposed fee study for some direction on what we should do with respect specifically to the small water system fees, to understand and recognize that those fees are a very substantial increase.
Is there a definition of what a small water system is anywhere, or are there subcategories under that?
There is a definition, and there are a variety of subcategories as well.
Where is that information available?
That information should be available on our website, but if not, I can certainly point you to that once we conclude this meeting.
I believe the state determined that a small water system was 3 hookups or more.
Yeah, so in general, and I'll just say this in general, because there's a lot of subcategories in here. In general, a small public water system is between 2 connections and 199 connections. Anything over 199, so 200 plus, that's actually regulated by the state. So those of you that live and are serviced by a appropriately named large water system, something like Contra Costa Water or East Bay Mud, or I think it's Delta Diablo out in the eastern part of the county. Those are large public water systems and they serve thousands of customers. The small ones are defined, like I said, between 2 and 199. And then within that, there's a bunch of subcategories and we can get in there.
But in my case, my water system is only 4 units.
4 connections.
So do I pay the same as somebody that has 199?
No, those permit fees are much different. And I can point you to what those are. We can certainly illustrate that for you if you're interested. And that document that I mentioned, we're planning on posting to the website, same place that you use to register for this. It's going to show a breakdown of all of the different fee categories and hopefully a little bit of an easier to read presentation, just essentially like almost like a spreadsheet table where you can actually see, what something that is, 2 to 10 connections, and then what's something that is, 100 to 199 connections. Don't quote me on that, but it's going to be down to sort of that level. Okay. And I think the last question, or no, it's the second to last question, can our fees be based on business size? And I should say some of these questions are tailored specifically to retail food establishments, and that's because that's been the vast majority of comments that we've received and questions that we've received from the regulated community. So for this particular one, the answer is tailored to retail food businesses, and that's because that's where this question originated. But for most retail food facilities, they're already based on size. So most food facilities are either based on square footage or the number of seats for the patrons that are visiting the business. And the way in which our fee categories are set up, it's based on risk to the public. So you can imagine a larger business that is serving more customers, or a large supermarket that is serving more customers or providing food to more customers, is what we consider to be a riskier type of operation. If something were to happen, has the potential to affect more people. And so the fees are adjusted accordingly. And we inspect them more frequently, the establishments that are more risky. And I think lastly, before we open it up to those online and here in the room, is when will these fees start? And I think I mentioned we're targeting May 20th for that public hearing at our Board of Supervisors. And so these fees, depending on what the board decides, would start immediately if they are adopted. If the board decides to push that down the road, where we have to come back and provide some new guidance or a new fee schedule, make changes, then that will delay that rollout as well. But it will be immediate upon the board's approval. And I will say, for the majority of our permitted facilities or permitted establishments, they run on what's called a permit year. And I think I touched on this at the beginning, March 1st through February 29th of the following year. So even though these fees, if the board were to adopt them on May 20th, would take effect immediately, most people wouldn't see an invoice for us or an increase in fees, especially if you are a returning or paying an invoice for a recurring permit. Those wouldn't be seen until the following January or February when we do our billing, because the billing cycle generally coincides with that permit year. We do have some businesses that are on a calendar year. So those would see those increases take effect in July. And we have other businesses that are on a calendar year basis. So they would see those come into effect a little bit sooner at the end of the year. But realistically, the majority of our businesses wouldn't see this take effect until, probably 6 to 9 months in the future. And with that, I think that's all I had. The next slide is just going to have our contact information in case your questions were not addressed now and you don't want to ask them at this particular point in time. You can always reach out to us. More than happy to have those individual discussions or ask and answer a particular question about a particular facility. But now I think we'd like to open it up to those of you that are in the room first, and then we'll move on to online unless you already have stuff that's on.
Not yet, but I actually want to interject really quickly. For those who are online, I know that a few people logged in a little bit late. If you did, don't worry, this presentation will be recorded and posted on our website for you to access later. Also, I believe a few people had difficulty accessing the Zoom link. We resent it. Apologize for the technical difficulties, but once again, we're available for all your questions. If you do have a question, raise your hand at the bottom of your Zoom account. You should see raise hand next to chat. I will raise you up to a panelist when we get to, rather to a speaker, when we get to that portion of our Q&A.
Okay. With that, why don't we start with any questions that remain in the room?
Questions or comments?
Comments are fine too. Yeah, anything.
Please, no, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Gus Yates. I have a cottage food operation permit from Walnut Creek. I received a letter saying that my bill was going to go up from $109 to $279. I thought, wow, that's an increase of a factor of 2.6. That's pretty eye-popping. What's going on here? So I went to Appendix A8 of the this study and looked around, and it turns out I was not the only one facing what are exorbitant increases. There was at least 10 categories where fees were going up by 2.5, factor of 2.5 or more, up to even a factor of 16. And, you know, even PG&E doesn't have the nerve to ask for more than about a 9% increase at any one time. So I think it's totally unreasonable to impose that large an increase at once, and these should be phased in with a maximum rate in change of, say, 25% per year over some period of years. The inflation excuse doesn't wash because the cumulative inflation since 2019 has been about 25%. Your own slide said 20% on labor, so that doesn't explain that 2.6 factor increase in my fee. Then this consultant did a lot of fancy dancing with the formulas, but it doesn't look to me that anyone really inspected the results. So there's some things that just don't stand up to common sense. The MECO fee is zero. I know somebody who has a MECO fee, who has a MECO already. You're issuing those permits. The only reason it's a zero is because the consultant didn't realize that those were being implemented because they weren't implemented back in 2019, 21, 22 on their data set. But somebody should have caught that. Here's another one. So suppose you have the cost of a permit for a vending machine is almost the same as a cost for a 50-bed skilled nursing facility. And I thought, well, wait a second. I mean, when was the last time somebody got sick from, you know, a soda can machine? And how could that possibly be correct that a vending machine requires the same staff effort as a 50-bed skilled nursing facility? That doesn't make sense. Here's another one. For a 50-bed general acute care facility, you'd be paying $817. But if you add one more bed, the fee goes up to $6,508. That doesn't make any sense. So no one really looked closely at these rates to see if they stood up to a straight face test. And finally, I have an issue with the billing rate. So in my day job, I am a professional consultant in the field of water resources planning and engineering. And in that field, even the most senior people don't bill out at $376 an hour, and billing rates are fully burdened. So if you're saying your average labor cost in the county is $376 an hour, I think, you know, not recommending we create a mess like what's going on in Washington, but somebody at the county needs to take a hard look at how you're doing your business, because that's way too high. So I think the Board of Supervisors should not accept these rates. They should be phased in. They should be subject to a more thorough common sense scrutiny, and the billing rate needs to come way down.
Yeah, if I could address some of what you said there. We do plan on having a phased increase for all retail food facilities. So your CFO.
2 years for a 16-fold increases.
I hear you.
Okay.
I hear you. In terms of the MECO fee, I'm not entirely sure what you're talking about there.
Sorry, the zero that you might have seen, that was.
It's in the table.
Yes, that was from the previous permit count. And so during those years, we did not have MECOs in existence.
Right, but it's your proposed fees.
But no, the proposed fees are $847 and $565.
But
It is the cost of service per activity.
But it doesn't list the current fee, I think is what the point is.
Okay.
So maybe it wasn't back then, but what's the current?
Oh, I see what you're
for
saying.
example,
Oh, I
So you're saying it's not.
How can you compare when you don't know what the current fee is?
Gotcha. I see it now. Yeah.
All right, okay.
Sorry, okay.
Let that one go, okay.
No, that's a totally valid point. Maybe it's not as transparent as it should be. We should show what the current fee is and then what the new fee is going to be. Totally. Yeah, it's very valid. And then in terms of some of those changes and whether or not we were looking at it carefully enough. What I can tell you is for some of those changes, especially some of those wild ones, like you mentioned, I think one for an acute care facility, some of those is based on sample size. So for instance, like those acute care facilities, we might not actually permit any of those. So the time that it takes for that activity to happen is a projection of what we think that it would take, but we don't actually have any real data on that. And there actually isn't anybody paying that particular fee. Now, I don't know if that's the particular case for the one that you're quoting, but I know for a lot of them, when we were reviewing that data set, a lot of the really wild changes, aside from the small water system fees, which I understand are substantial, and on the same orders of magnitude as what the gentleman is discussing here. For some of those other categories, it's honestly just based on no data at all. And because we don't have any permits, we don't actually have any time that was reviewed in the study. It's just all a projection based on what it was previously. It's just the numbers just being carried over. I think you had said one other thing, but I
The
can't.
billing rate.
The billing rate. Yes, the fully burdened hourly rate, I understand is substantial. And that was done based on the calculation that you saw in the study. I think, as I tried to illustrate, that is basically the amount of indirect and direct costs that we have, divided by the labor hours, the total number of staff that we have that are out there performing the services that require those permits is how we got to that. I get that it's going up, and it's going up quite substantially. And I hear what you're saying. I totally hear you.
Well, listening to some of the fees that he has mentioned, makes it rather embarrassing that a small water system would pay far more than what he's talking about. That's at the existing fees.
Right.
When we don't see anybody ever, and now it's going to $975.
Yeah, so I think, and this actually goes back to what was raised, I think, by the gentleman here. And I think also you had chimed in to the same effect, and that is a lot of the student sample size. So for small water systems, I want to say we only permit about 75. So you're taking the amount of time that it takes to do 75, as opposed to some of the other categories that we regulate. Like I'll just, for instance, give you retail food facilities at about 4,500. There's a lot more data that's there that comprises what we can calculate in terms of how long it takes us to do
But
things.
I'm not too sure what you do.
Yes, and I hear what you're saying there. And I think the thing that I will say, not to use this as an excuse, but just more for enlightenment, I guess, is it's not just the services that are being provided out in the field. So those visits that you receive by the inspector on an annual basis or biannual basis. It's also a lot of the stuff that happens here in the office. So we receive a lot of, especially for those systems that have treatment or are facing violations for a number of drinking water standards, exceeding those standards, not meeting them. There's a lot of reporting that has to happen. And a lot of that actually happens here behind the scenes that you don't see, but we're still tracking that time because we're spending time, administering that particular program.
Did you say I'm supposed to have somebody coming and inspecting?
You are supposed to be having somebody
Not
coming
in
and inspecting.
35 years.
Well, that's a problem. And I'd definitely like to hear about that a little bit more so that I can look particularly into your situation.
Thing that's frustrating for me also is we're already required to have a lab do samplings.
Mhm.
And we don't hear anything from anyone except if there's a negative result,
Right.
which I've gotten two in 35 years.
Mhm.
And those, being a certified lab tech, can tell you we're probably sampling errors, not my water system. Everything I manage is managed quite well.
Sure.
What you're asking me to do is actually for 3 of my tenants, I own 2 duplexes, increase their rent by $26 a month each, single parents.
Mhm.
And we're already getting hit pretty darn hard with things,
Yep.
much less on a service that we see absolutely no benefit from whatsoever. It's actually more or less covered or regulated, not necessarily regulated, but kept track of by an outside service, which we are already paying for when we have the sampling done, which we get direct reports on.
Right.
So in today's society or with the technology we have, I'm sure you guys don't even see anything except if it's a negative report. So no one's really doing anything whatsoever, except if a negative report comes in. Now, if I've had 2 negative reports generated in 35 years, and I've seen 2 inspectors in 35 years, and the only complaint that I've gotten in all that time is the well is actually inside of a 3-car garage, as I put up a partition wall to partition the wall off,
Mhm.
so my tenants don't have access to the well. And he told me I couldn't store my latex paint next to the well, where it's been for 35 years.
Mhm.
Great, that was moved. Now, you're gonna ask me to pay $1,000 a year, raise my tenant's rent by $26 a month for a well that's been there for, I don't know, maybe since the 40s?
Right.
Right? I mean, this is a ridiculous request. And I'm quite frankly surprised that there isn't a bigger turnout for people to have these small systems. I understand the increases in the multiple visits for situations where you have 199 units. I understand that hotels, motels, restaurants, athletic facilities. I get that. What I don't get is the extraordinarily high burden you're placing on people who have a couple of rental units that they're depending on for their retirement income. Add upon that the restrictions that we've received as far as even being able to increase rents, regardless of our increases in taxes and other operating expenses. I just think it's unreasonable. I think that exception has to be made. Subcategories have to be created for people that do have small systems that are really operating just that, a small system. They're not generating huge amounts of funds. They're not seeing huge amounts of traffic. They're not seeing any sort of problems with with their water systems. They just don't present to me that kind of work on the part of the county for all this. And I'm going back all the way to 2015, because 2015 is the first time I think you raised them from $50 up to $350. And I had a real problem at that time. Okay, and at that time, I don't remember who I talked to. I don't know if it's any same people that are here that were here back then, but I had the same conversation with them about wanting to see this study. Well, they were supposed to send it to me. All right. Unfortunately, we were getting ready to file a class action lawsuit. I come from a family of lawyers. Since nothing happened, nothing happened.
Right.
All right. We're here again. And this is just an absolute reach that's not acceptable.
I hear you.
Well, okay, you hear me. So I guess my option is to have an attorney present at the board meeting that you're gonna have on, you said May 20th?
May 20th is when we plan to go to the board, and it will be a notice public hearing. So yeah, if you wish to have an attorney present, or if you wish to speak yourself, you're well within your right to do that.
I just find it very difficult how it's even conscionable for a county that's not providing a service to triple the cost on a service that has absolutely no benefit to me or any of my tenants. Like I said, because like anything else in business, we have to pass those costs along. And I have 3 single parents there that this is gonna hurt them.
No.
This is my retirement. It hurts me too,
Right.
because that gets included in the amount I can raise the rent next year. It limits it. So that's my piece for the moment.
Thank you for sharing. Yes, sir.
Well, in my situation, it supplies my family and 2 neighbors. And if there was a problem with the well and it didn't pass the tests, I'd be concerned. So I'm not gonna continue supplying water to my neighbors and my own family if it's gonna fail.
Anyone else here in the room? Comments, questions, concerns? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have a couple. So my first concern is the timeline for the comment period.
Mhm.
So, my name is Stacy. I'm the executive director of Contra Costa Certified Farmers Markets. We've been operating farmers markets in Contra Costa County for 42 years. Not me personally that long, me 16 years. And I've spent a lot of time in this building because in the olden days, we used to go to Kinko's, make the copies, bring it in here with the check. Now more and more is being done online. I just want to get some clarity. So I have a couple things. From this fee schedule, when we're talking about the increases, as people have been talking, it's getting a little bit more clear. Where it says the current fee and it says the cost of service per activity, is the cost of service per activity the proposed fee increase? Because
Yes.
I don't see a column that says
Yes.
proposed fee increase. So that was a question,
Yeah,
right?
and
So-
you're absolutely right.
So it's, and I have a few more.
Yeah,
And I
go
think that the problem with that is that, I have over 100 members
Mhm.
that this is going to affect.
Mhm.
So I have a lot of stakeholders myself that I need to engage with.
Sure.
But if I'm not clear on what it is, then I can't present to them, just like you're presenting to us today, right? So I'm sure you had a lot of meetings to prepare for this. You had the fee study, you met with the consultants, you talked to your internal team. On a micro scale, I have to do the same thing.
Sure.
And so when the workshop is 4 working days from the timeline to submit comments, that really handicaps my ability to engage with my stakeholders and have them provide their feedback. Like my CFO, people who are baking at home, and there's still questions about how the farmer's market fee schedule is going to affect them, and others. So I have asked, I've submitted a comment formally online for an extension of the comment period because we need more time I'm hoping to get the clarity I need today here
Sure.
to take this to my membership. I can barely nail them down in 30 days, let alone 4, right? So, and we're a teeny tiny admin staff of 1, me, right? So that's number 1. Number 2 is beyond the fee increase, and I'm gonna get to that in just a second when I talk about TFS. I just wanna discuss and get some questions answered about the changing permit process for non-ag producers.
Yep.
So as a certified farmer's market in Contra Costa County, we pull 2 annual permits every year and TFF permits 4 times a year.
Right.
The annual permit is easy. I'm just mailed an invoice and I pay it. That's it. There's no application to fill out. They just send me an invoice and I pay it annually every year for ag and non-ag. Just so that we're clear, ag is farmers and ranchers and the non-ag is just for everyone else in the room. The non-ag are mostly prepackaged goods. That could include CFO. Anyone who's open sampling or cooking on site is a TFF. And so, you know, I know every county does a little bit different. Doug would know better than I. But in Contra Costa County, all of our prepackaged food people, non-ag, have been under that annual permit. So it's one and done, we pull it, it's done. On average, and this varies, that breaks down to, gosh, roughly $60 a year per non-ag vendor. That's our cost. Every dollar of income that we get comes from participants. So it's really our vendors' costs that gets passed on to them. If they come into the TFF process, I want to be really clear about what tier they fall in and what that's going to cost, because someone who's bringing cookies to the market, you know, an inspector's spending such a tiny amount of time at their booth.
Yep.
So, you know, one thing I'm going to have to explain to my members is what's the ROI, right, for them. And we're charging you more. What are they getting more? Are they getting advice? Are they getting guidance? Are they getting instruction? You know, what's the return on investment there? How much time is the inspector spending with them? You know, I mean, now that I understand the chart better, it makes a little bit more sense. But when we're talking about just bringing them into the temp event process, you know, that could potentially be a jump. It's over 1,000% of that fee. So we're talking $7,400 that we would be paying instead of roughly, I think we paid $600. So, you know, I mean, looking at the table, it kind of alludes to the fact that there is going to be a tiered. So I'd like to learn more about that.
Yeah.
So I can take it, because that's going to be a lot of what my members are asking about. Sure. But like, my concern is that like under current fee, it just says new. So it just completely the study ignores the fact that we have been pulling a non-ag permit this whole year. So my 2 cents and my feedback is that I think that these non-ag vendors that are going to be now recategorized into the TFF process. Yep. And to be honest, I think that makes some sense. I really do. That needs to be in line with the non-ag permit we're already pulling. The study makes it sound as if they were is brand new.
Right.
But they really were under a different process. So that's my first comment. I have at least 2 more.
Okay, can I address that real quick?
Please do, yeah.
Okay, so first off, with relation to, you know, difficulties with knowing which columns mean what, let us take some responsibility for that. I think we could have done a better job of illustrating what each of those things mean. Of course, we've been doing this for the last, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years now, going through this process. And so we understand it very well, but I think we could have articulated it and demonstrated it a little bit better for those of you that might be seeing this now for, you know, the first time within the last 30 days. So I get that. And my apologies for that. With regard to just temp events in general, we regulate quite a few, both at certified farmers markets and then events like, you know, the Brentwood Corn Fest or the Pittsburgh Seafood Festival or the Walnut Creek Walnut Fest. Like, there's a bunch of these things that happen throughout the year. And we've gotten feedback from those temp event organizers on different ways in which we could do things. And one of those has been a resounding, we currently have only 3 tiers for temp events, and it's based on the number of booths. But it essentially treats a booth that produces or prepares, you know, does full food prep, making tacos. You know, you can imagine the different types of food that gets made. all the way down to, as you mentioned, like a prepackaged vendor or somebody that's just doing sampling. What we decided to do was, again, in hearing that feedback, was to expand that TFF, essentially tier system, still based on the number of booths. And of course, if you have, the more booths that you have, the lower the fee is. But to include those additional categories for just sampling, or just doing, and I'm
Prepackaged.
prepackaged, right? So these would be for the case of the farmers markets, and I believe you guys are both from farmers market associations. These would be for the quote non-ag vendors. They would fall into one of those two categories depending on what they're doing. And so yes, it would move them into the TFF process, but they would be categorized based on what they're doing. It's not as though they would be paying the same price as maybe you were paying for all of the temp event food booths in your markets at one point. They're going to fall within whatever the tiers are based on the total number of booths at your event, right? So if you have, let's say, a total of, just going to use it for instance, 25 food booths, you're going to be pulling a permit for the lowest amount per booth possible.
Is it gonna be within that tier? So for example, you know, let's go with food prep 3 to 7.
Yep.
I'm assuming food prep 3 to 7 is your taco example, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So is it 3 to 7 food prep people, you pay this rate, and then within your prepackaged 3 to 7 within that rate, or is it overall?
We're looking at the entire event, right? So if your event has, let's say, I don't know, 8 food booths, then everybody, depending on those categories, would slot into that same category,
I see.
if that makes sense to you.
It does.
I know it's a little nuanced, and I'm sorry for those of you that.
No, it's okay, I know. I've been doing it a long time, so it makes sense to me, but I hear it probably doesn't to others.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so I understand that. I also want to just like point out that the temp event application itself is going from then $45 4 times a year.
Mhm.
Because that's the other thing, is that the TFFs are not pulled annually.
Right.
Those are pulled 4 times a year. So you have to multiply that cost by 4.
Right.
So what our vendors are paying for a TFF, they're paying at my market 4 times a year. They're paying at Doug's market 4 times a year. And I know some of my fellow operators are on the Zoom. So, you know, my concern about raising the costs on these prepackaged folks and people who are doing food prep too high is that they're going to pull out of the smaller markets because they're just not, they're not going to be able to afford to do as many markets as they're doing now. We're talking about micro businesses, right? Micro producers. And then just like the fee itself to pull it going from $45 to, what is it, 282, I believe, 4 times a year. I mean, we're a nonprofit. Most farmers markets are operated by nonprofits. We're just trying to cover our costs. So we take the money from our vendors and we give it to you, and we give it to county ag, and we give it to fire, and we give it to a lot of other places too. That's a huge jump. I didn't do the math, but it's up there, right? That percentage is really up there. So that was my one concern. While we're talking about TFS, I just want to kind of show you what I have to do 4 times a year. So I would love to stop managing the TFF process for CCCFM. I have a lot of things to do running the organization. But I feel like I just want you to understand, I feel like I cannot pass it on to my market managers because I don't know how to explain it to them. You know, I honestly and truly, like, it's so convoluted that I just do it myself because I don't feel like I can explain it. So, you know, I've been working with Nicole. I think she's great. She's very smart. I'm looking forward to the consistencies that are coming and the organization that is coming. But this is my package for Walnut Creek, okay? It's pretty thick. I know, you know, it's pretty thick. It's a lot of paper, and printing is getting expensive. We have to do like this cover page where we're listing, this is how many booths I have, this is how many mobile food trucks I have, even though those are already permitted under another process, sometimes within the county, you know, how many vendors are exempt, and then list all of our vendors, and then we have to calculate the fee ourselves, do all of this math ourselves, and submit this package to your office. Attached to every checklist that these vendors fill out, so this package is 11. They have to fill out this checklist and send it to me. They often send it to me in some wild format. that I have to then make readable. I have to attach however they're licensed. And out of these 11 vendors, they're all licensed different ways. Some might have a PFR because they're conducting wholesaling. Some might have a CFO. Some are maybe just in a commercial kitchen, right? So I need to give the commercial kitchen permit. I need to give the commissary agreement that's also signed by the county they're in. So if they're in Alameda, I'm giving you the commissary agreement signed by Alameda County and their kitchen. I mean, it's a lot of paperwork is my point, right? So, and every vendor has a different set of paperwork depending on the kind of products they carry.
Sure.
We keep copies of this stuff, and we submit this stuff to you guys 4 times a year. We have never been asked to submit this kind of backup for the non-ag category. When these non-ag vendors come into this category, this is going to double in size.
Sure.
That's a lot of admin work for us. We're doing all of this admin work. We're just kind of, sometimes I feel like handing it over on a platter. So again, when you're seeing fees go up, but we're kind of doing a lot of the work to ourselves. Also with the inspection notes. The inspection notes come on a handwritten 3-carbon thing. We have to take them, digest them, retype them out. I mean, we're not passing those costs on to our vendors in a direct way.
Sure.
So when these fees are coming up, it's just kind of like, well, we're doing a lot of the admin work for you guys, is kind of how it feels a lot.
Right.
In fact, this is so large, the biggest problem I have is giving it to you. You know, in the old days I walked in, but you know, that stopped during COVID was we started emailing it.
Yep.
Nicole did set up a web link.
Mhm.
I kind of helped her troubleshoot it. It works really well. But you're getting this same paperwork from me on these guys. And I'm willing to bet, Doug, I don't know for sure, but my money's on the fact that we have some of the same vendors here. So you're getting the paperwork from me, you're getting it from Doug, and you're getting it 4 times a year. I mean, it just feels like a lot.
Yeah, no, and what I'm hearing from you is that there needs to be some efficiencies gained in how this particular program is managed and the paperwork that's involved. So I'm definitely hearing that.
We all have an interest in people being safe and nobody getting sick at our markets. And I really want farmers markets and the health department to work together as partners towards that goal instead of it feeling adversarial as it has in the past.
Okay, no, and thank you for sharing that because that's important for us to hear. And I think that's something that we don't want it to be adversarial. We want to be seen as somebody who's there to not only help the consumer, but also, you know, you folks that are trying to, you know, also make sure that things are safe at your own markets. So yeah, I'm hearing the efficiencies. And I'm wondering if maybe, I know we meet quarterly with you folks at the
No.
markets or bi-yearly?
Sometimes,
Okay,
yeah.
so we need to pick up that frequency is what I'm saying.
Absolutely. I mean, there was never a history of it being anything regular.
Yeah.
And again, I don't have a problem with incremental fees going up. We've paid them over the years, not for 6 years, but we've paid them previously. We paid them in 2019 with no meeting, right? Like we all get it. We all get that part, but
Right.
it's just that they're going up so much.
Sure.
And also administrative and enforcement changes that are coming along with all of it.
Sure. Yeah, and I think we can certainly help with those administrative and enforcement changes, right? I think there needs to be a dialogue and one that is continual between us and the market managers. And I'm hoping you referenced Nicole. She's, for those of you who don't know, she's one of our folks who's now sort of taken the lead at administering this particular program. Hopefully we can create that consistency. And maybe there are some efficiencies that can be gained in the amount of paperwork that you guys have to supply us, especially for those vendors that might be shared. And I think these are all things that we can look at and hopefully we can partner together and work through some of these things to make the application process easier on both of you and your counterparts throughout the county, and still gives us the information that we need in order to, to process things in the way that we need to process them. So I think I'm hearing what you're saying. I sense the frustration. I understand the frustration. I mean, just seeing the volume of paperwork that you have there and then knowing that that's gonna, double in size, you said, or maybe even quadruple in size. Yeah.
Well, it all expires at different times too, right? And so it's a challenge.
I will say, and again, I'm not trying to use this as an excuse, but we are somewhat limited in terms of those temporary event permits. The law does state that they are temporary, so they're only valid for 90 days, which is why it's redone quarterly. Now, that's not to say that maybe we don't need all that paperwork that you supplied initially, especially if the vendors aren't changing. Like, I think these are things that we can work through here internally in consultation with all of you to try to make that process a little bit more
Well, and
smooth.
you also checked when you inspect,
Sure.
right? So, I mean, it's a conversation we can have at a more granular.
Oh, yeah, and you mentioned
level.
inspection. So we are hope to move on to, at the end of this year, a new database management system that will hopefully allow us to do electronic inspection reporting at your markets. So you won't have those carbon copies any longer. I will say it is going to take us a little bit of time, so bear with us, but we are moving in that direction.
Citizen portal.
Yes, this new computer database management system will also have a citizen access portal, so you all will be able to gain these things and submit things to us without having to go through that web link that you used to troubleshoot with Nicole, which I appreciate your willingness to do that.
Thank
Yeah, yes, sir.
I don't know how it's possible, but after listening to Stacy, I'm both exhilarated and exhausted. So my name is Doug Hayden, and I'm with the California Farmers Markets Association. I've been involved with farmers markets since 1979. I know it's hard to believe. I've been running farmers markets probably in the mid 80s. And so we've seen a lot of changes and things develop over time.
Sure.
And when the farmers markets whole thing started in the late 70s, 79, it came upon us because they really wanted to make things that could be sold directly from the farmer to the consumer. And in order to do that, they had to make certain guidelines, make it so it's mutually beneficial. The three different areas is to the farmer, the consumer, and actually the government, the way they worked with us and how the oversight was actually carried on. So it's kind of a special situation, okay? Because we service, and Stacy knows this, 2 to 3% of the population. We bring the farmer to the consumer, to their doorstep. And we're feeding Californians big time. If we went to 4%, Stacy and I would be retired. So it's that big of a difference. And we work really hard to bring those people in. And so when you increase costs like this, it is dangerous. There are the fringe that are not going to be able to continue. Small markets are going to get hit really hard, especially at the tier where it's 1 to 3 or 2 to 3 people that are selling in a market. All of a sudden, they're spending an enormous amount of money to get their permit to sell their packaged product now. And if they're doing any cooking on site, it's going to be terrible. It's going to be $1,092 a year. So I run with my staff about 50,000 stall days a year. We have 14 markets. We operate in 4 counties. Maybe it's 5. It's Contra, Costa, San Mateo, San Francisco, Santa Clara, and Alameda. So it's 5. So we get to see the whole slew of how all these health departments operate. And you're the only one that does quarterly things that drive us nuts. Creates a whole new niche for the paper industry. So if they can do it, I certainly think you guys should be able to figure it out. And I understand it's good for somebody to come in, I just want to do your market for 2 quarters of the year and I'll be done. It's not really saving them any money because your rates are more than double, sometimes triple what other people are paying in other counties. When I'm looking at your grid, I'm looking at per booth on food prep 1 to 2, and then there's 3 to 7 and the food prep 8+. And you have the current fee as it's stated, and then you have your full cost recovery. That's kind of misleading because that's only 1 quarter's worth. Should say in here 1 quarter only. Doesn't reflect the entire year. So I'm looking at instead of $273 full recovery, it's really $1,092. And instead of $179, it's really $716. And instead of $151, it's $624. So that's pretty kind of astounding to look at that. And when Stacy was commenting about the $45 application fee that we pay going up to $282, that's a 600% rate of increase, 600% more. Okay. And I know you got to do stuff with that now that there's more paper. what I do understand that needed to happen is the individuals sell the food that's already contained in package, and they weren't barely paying anything. We were kind of covering that with our non-ag fee.
Sure.
And so now that's been taken from us, that saves me about $800. But then I'm gonna make up for that, paying that $245 on the application fee. But I'm looking at, even when you look at your package stuff, sounds like most of our markets, everybody's gonna be in the 8+ category, so it's gonna be $38 possibly
Yep.
a quarter.
Perfect.
Okay, now I feel better about that. Because now you're in tune to what other counties do.
Right, and so, yeah, what we didn't want was, when moving to this sort of structure, to charge, a prepackaged or just somebody that's doing
Right.
sampling, the same as somebody that's preparing, full food, tacos and the like.
So let's go, so I'm feeling better about that, but I'm feeling really bad about the temporary food facilities that are cooking on site, and that's a lot. It's a lot, and especially for my little Rossmore market. that I tried not to permit for years until finally I was taken to the ground and they made me. So I was like, okay, I'll do it. And so I can have maybe 2 guys doing hot food in there, popcorn and maybe El Tio Santos or something like that. And so we end up we pay half their fee. And so, because otherwise it's not gonna work. It only goes for 4 months, maybe 4.5 months. And that's horrible how that falls into the payment category. We can begin in May. Of course, we got to pay for that quarter. Then you got another quarter. And then we get the last, that's like 3 quarters we pay for, and we're only using maybe 1.5, 3 quarters. Anyways, it's bad luck. So I just think when you look at these fees, that you consider that we're such a mutually beneficial program for the state of California and everybody involved in a food distribution system that helps so many people, and not to mention the little guys, the farmers and the food purveyors that come and if you have not run a farmer's market on a cold, blustery, rainy day, you've never really experienced the guts that it takes to do what we do, protecting people in the wind, cars. It's been a horrible experience downtown Walnut Creek. Stacy can talk for about an hour on that. We take that into consideration. Health department does too. You worry about it. And so we have to consider how we keep everybody safe. So it's a combined effort. And so if we can get some cooperation on these numbers, it would help us, help our sustainability and help us thrive, because we ultimately have to pass it on. And I think we're going to lose some folks. I really do. Because their margins have to make it. And 25% of our budget goes into marketing and promotion. And that's a ton of money and time. And if you've never seen a zucchini car race, you have no idea what's going to happen to you. So anyways, we'll do what it takes to keep people there. But if we lose vendors, it makes it even harder.
Sure. Yeah, I hear you.
And I'm gonna let the people on Zoom comment and other people in the room, but I just wanna piggyback on what Doug said there, because I have a comment from Chris Hall from the Kensington Farmers Market. And it relates to that. We pull these permits 4 times a year, and our markets run year round, most of them, not all of them. And in the winter time, our vendors' revenue is so low, they have to spread that across, yet, nothing changes with the business operations. I mean, to be honest, there are days our members are out there not making any money. They're just out there hoping to cover their costs. Sometimes they don't when it's windy and rainy and we're still out there, so when they're paying those high fees all year, but their revenue is not the same all year, right? So that's just a point I wanted to share from Chris Hall.
Appreciate that. And I think, so farmers markets and temporary food facilities, CFOs, MECOs, anything that's in the retail food category, that will be part of that phased increase, right? So it's not going to all happen at once. It's going to be phased in over a number of years. We're still looking at what that looks like. So, by no means is what I'm telling you here on this slide final. But it is something that we are aware of, that these fees are going up, and it is going to impact all small businesses and large businesses. But realistically, the small ones are the ones that are going to feel it the most. And we hear that. I sense the frustration. I hear the frustration. And so I think we're trying to help smooth it out. And we do want to work with you guys. We don't want to see you guys lose vendors. We certainly want to maintain the same level of food safety. out at each of the markets. And if there are some efficiencies that we can gain, whether it's procedural, administrative, even on-site inspection wise, like we're open to hearing that from you. And I'm hoping that we can continue this dialogue as we move forward, and certainly welcome you telling us that feedback, whether it's through our program staff or even directly to me or our assistant director. Like, we would love to hear it. Right, and so why don't we, I think there's some Zoom participants that have some questions, so why don't we go ahead and work on this?
All right, so I'm gonna go in order of the first hand raised. Melissa Tiscareno, I'm gonna allow you to speak. You're gonna get a prompt that says unmute. If you can please unmute yourself, and you should be able to speak to the room.
Just a quick time check for everyone. It looks like we have about 45-ish minutes until the end of this. I think we should be able to get through everything that we have, but just to let everyone know. And then if there's additional specific questions that you have, particular facilities.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hi. Okay. I just wanted to kind of make a comment, kind of piggy off some of the small water system folks that are in the room as well. We're just a primary residence, and amongst the 3 households, we share one well. And 2 of my neighbors are, approaching retirement. I am a, mother with young children, and to see our permit fees increase from like $300 to $900 just seems unreasonable and unfair. I understand, annual increases, and you guys haven't increased in the past, which I think you probably should have. But I just don't think that high of an increase is reasonable, especially since in the 12 years that I've lived there, I haven't seen one person come out to inspect anything. We do our own quarterly inspections and water treatments ourselves, and we do different samples from everybody's houses as well. But I haven't seen any support from Contra Costa at all with regards to this. So it's kind of like, what are we paying all these additional costs for not getting any benefit from it? So that was kind of my comment, and kind of just wanted to add on to some of the other folks in the room.
Yep, thank you for sharing. And I think, as I mentioned before, we are looking at ways in which we can help that. Whether that means we retain local oversight, or whether it goes back to the state, that will have an effect on what you ultimately end up paying. So thank you for sharing. I hear what you're saying, and appreciate you joining us and letting us know that this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Melissa. Next up is Jim Kane.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm Jim Kane. I'm from Byron United Methodist Church over in Byron, California. Our concern, and I guess a question and concern, we have been paying $510 a year annually for our well to be checked. The proposed increase is up to over $2,300. That's a 350% increase for 1 year. And I'm just wondering, along with some of the folks in our church, we have about 25 people in our congregation. We have one well, and we're there on Sundays. Why we have such a large increase? We haven't done anything differently. So that's my question, and I'll just listen now. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. And I probably should have mentioned this earlier in relation to some of the other folks here in the room that brought that up. And the reason for that increase is, and generally for small water systems, which is what I'm talking about in particular here, is we used to receive grant funds from the state, and we no longer receive those grant funds from the state. And so we have to basically, those grant funds were being used to essentially subsidize the program, which allowed us to keep the fees at what you're currently paying. Being that we don't get that from the state any longer, we now have to charge in the form of permit fees that difference. And so that's why the small water system fees in particular are the ones that are seeing the largest increases. I think you heard the gentleman mention a 350% increase, and he is absolutely correct. They are quite large increases across the board for all of our small water systems.
So that's going to put us at a point where at some point we will no longer be able to afford that with the small congregation that we have.
Yep.
And so we need to do something with the state reintroducing those funds or that you were getting, because that's all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And we have been exploring and we will continue to explore funding options that can help to subsidize that particular program, as well as looking at whether or not we even continue with, our regulatory oversight of that particular program, or whether or not that's something that goes back to the state, in which case you would not pay a permit fee to us here locally. You would pay a permit fee to the state. And I can tell you that the state's fees
that would be a
less.
lot more. I can already imagine how much more the state would be. Yes.
Yeah, ironically, it actually is less. And so.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah, I had a feeling you'd think so. And most of you would probably think so. And so, yeah, this is something that, as I mentioned, whether we keep the regulatory authority here is not necessarily my decision. This is something that affects the entire county as a whole. And so we're going to be seeking some direction from our board and asking them specifically, is this something with the amount of increases that we need in order to sustain the program that we want to continue to do here, or do we give up that authority and give it back to the state, which would ease some of the financial pressures on the individual systems?
Thank you.
Some of us may wonder, what is the program?
You mean like what services that we're providing?
What
Yeah,
services are there?
I hear that. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, that you're not seeing people. And I mean, the only thing I can really say to that is there is stuff that's happening here in the building that we're having to do either with the state of California or that we're reviewing with the reports that are coming into our office. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. You're not seeing that necessary boots on the ground service at your particular water system. And yeah, that's something that we definitely need to look into for sure.
And I would question why the state, which is fat already, could do it for less money than the county can.
I don't know that I can really answer that question other than to offer some of this is due to just the amount of systems that the cost gets distributed over. I think I mentioned before with our retail food facilities, even though you're seeing increases, those increases aren't quite as substantial as you are for the small water systems. And that's because we have about 4,500 retail food facilities that we permit, that we spread those costs over, as opposed to water systems, which there's only about 75. If I project that out and look at it statewide, that number is going to increase, of course. And so whatever the cost that the state has, they can then spread those across more systems, just like we do with food facilities. I don't know that that's the actual answer. That's just an educated guess on my part, but I know that's certainly what we experience here.
Well, if they feel like you're not doing anything anyway, and then you're asking for more money for not doing anything anyway, and the reporting is already done by another entity, which is the labs, right, at additional cost to us. Mm-hmm. It's kind of hard for me to understand how you can justify you're increasing your fees for doing nothing.
Right. And again, the only thing I can respond with is I think there's stuff that is happening that maybe you're just not seeing, and maybe we're not doing a good enough job at articulating what that actually is. And that's something that we should be better at if we're going to continue with the program.
Well, how can you articulate when you do nothing except receive a report from the water testing company? And in that case, nothing happens there either, unless the problem is rectified. So, we're being charged $1,000 a year for someone not to get a bad report. I mean, I'm just really I'm just really kind of confused. I mean, I've had several businesses. I own multiple properties. All right, this one is really a thorn in my side
Mhm.
because I think it's an unjust fee, not justified, not substantiated. I'm receiving absolutely no benefit whatsoever.
Mhm.
There's no rationale as far as I can see dollar wise why these fees are being increased, nor can I have been over the years really be able to find anyone that can explain why these fees or how they've justified those fees, other than saying, well, we've done these reports, we've done these studies. Well, you know what? If you're not doing anything and you can't tell me what you're actually doing or where that's a benefit to me, I understand increasing fees for restaurants. I understand these things that are most, for the most part, generating decent profits and returns for the vendors involved, for the businesses involved, where they can spread this out over multiple customers and the incremental costs are negligible. But if someone such as myself, as a, as a landlord or a small property owner, these fees are extraordinary. We're talking huge amounts that are coming out of what we project to be our retirement income. And since we don't really see any benefit for it, I mean, I could see if, the county was coming out and doing the testing themselves,
Mhm.
I could understand that I can understand that, but no, we have to pay an outside company to do that, which has also tripled its fees within the last few years.
Right.
And again, I understand that they have their additional costs and their travel. As a business owner, I've had to increase my fees as well, but not to this extent, and not being able to justify it to my clients and my customer base. And I find this one hard to justify to my tenants when I keep my rents as small as possible. And they'll all attest, I haven't raised my rent, but maybe once in 5 years. I'm way lower than everyone else in the market. And I have to go to them and say, you know what? I have to raise your rates this year. Yeah, I know food's going up. I know gas is going up, but you know what? The county's asking for more money for something that they don't do. And, and you got to cover it because, this is my retirement and I have to eat too. And it's not my fault. You wouldn't be seeing these increases if I wasn't getting these unjust increases.
Right. Thank you for sharing. And I think the one thing that I could offer to you is maybe outside of this particular meeting, we sit down with the folks here in the program that actually do the work, and maybe we can do a better job of explaining to you what actually is going into the fee that you're paying. I know that it's going up. I think I've, at least to the best of my ability, articulated as to why. But maybe for your particular system, we can sit down and really have a discussion about your system in particular, and how that increase will affect you and what services that you'll see from that increase. I think that's as best I can do.
I don't need any other services. My service is what I pay for every quarter when I have the well testing. People come out and they perform an analysis on the water
Gotcha.
in my well. That's the service I need. That's what I want to pay for. Not some bureaucracy that's looking over my shoulder saying, but you might get a bad report and we have to substantiate this entire organization around, you might get that bad report. And that's what I see.
Got it. Well, again, thank you for sharing. Again, in the interest of time, I think we still have a couple folks that are online. So why don't we go and address those, and if there are any additional questions or comments in the room, we can certainly hear those.
All right, so up next is Chris Hall. You should get a prompt. Please unmute yourself.
There, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Fantastic. Hey, listen, I'll first off say we can bypass that first one because I think Stacy pretty much covered that about asking for an extension on the time for comment. And we'll await your verdict on that. I did want to say that, and I think you know this already, our vendors are paying, or we already pay fees to the U.S. Department of Agriculture in the state of California.
Yep.
Many of our vendors also have to have their own kitchen permits pay. Those don't necessarily come from Contra Costa, but we have vendors from Sonoma, Alameda, San Mateo, and so on. What I was wondering is, I know that, just go down to my very last comment because I know time is short here. We all have budgets to work within, so I'm wondering what has changed in your operating budget to necessitate the increases that you're proposing. what's kind of increased with your overhead? Because we're talking about overhead here, because these permits, we don't necessarily get something back, like we're buying a service and it's part of our partnership with you, but we're not getting a tangible product that we can say to the public, oh, well, we're paying, or my vendor, we're collecting this money and this is what you're getting back for it. So wondering what's changed, if anything, in the budget.
Yeah, no, and thank you for asking, and maybe I didn't do a good enough job earlier. But the main driver in all of this is labor costs. Those have gone up. I understand that those have gone up, maybe not in lockstep with some of the fee changes that you're seeing, because the other thing that's happening there is we're evaluating how long it's taking us to do certain things and reallocating the fees that are paid to those areas where we're actually providing the service. And I know there's been some disagreements on what those services are. But again, as we've had our consultant calculate and as we've reviewed, we're essentially looking at where we're spending the time doing this, performing the service, and then readjusting the fees accordingly. And the biggest thing that's changed in the budget has been the labor cost. We haven't necessarily added employees. In fact, we are currently, we do have a vacancy rate, which we intend to use or hope to use to be able to phase in some of the fee increases, especially for retail food establishments. But it's generally the labor costs. That's the biggest single expenditure. And that's where we've seen the most increases. Of course, like any business, things like paper, pens, keeping the lights on, the water, which is nominal. These are all very nominal fees. Those have increased, but
They
not
add up.
nearly to the extent of the labor.
Sure. And I would just say on the other side of that, the vendors, farmers, and all the people that work in the non-ag sector their costs have also gone up.
Yeah, no, and I hear that. I don't want to say, I'm not
Double-edged
trying to use that as an excuse,
No.
because I know that everybody's costs have gone up. But I'm just trying to be transparent that when you ask what in our
Sure.
budget has changed, it's primarily the labor cost column.
No, I appreciate that. And that was really the gist of my question. The other last thing I wanted to add is that, we are, I just lost my train of thought. I'm just finished a major surgery yesterday, so I'm on a little altered state here. What I was thinking about is so if to get this, I understand you want to have a nice smoother transition and have this incremental increase going on. Well, can we add to that a little more time for comment? I know Stacy brought that up, but I think it's important for us to digest all this, to talk to our vendors, meet with our board, talk to all the people so we can plan our budget for the year ahead. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And I wish you a good recovery, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, so next up is Justin Johal. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Justin. I'm with Foragers Market, and we operate the San Ramon Market. And we had, a couple things was sort of what Doug touched on is, we subsidize some of our vendors so they can be at the market. And a lot of them fall into that cottage food prepackaged section. So the fees increasing there is, it's going to be felt by all. And to touch on everyone, it does feel like, okay, the fee is gonna go higher, but what are we getting in return? A lot of us have, built our own databases. We're all operating as micro health departments, trying to middleman everyone's permits. And just looking at our last quarter, I mean, San Ramon submitted 46 pages to the permit department. And if we get 3 more classifications, that's going to be 150 pages for me, maybe 600 from Doug. And you're going to be in, 2,000 pages worth of permitting by the end of the quarter. And it seems like the costs aren't really being allocated correctly, I guess. And so it it doesn't seem like things are getting cleaner for the market side. There's 2 weeks of lead up to file our permit. So we're gonna let our vendors know to fill out their permits next week to get it to you 2 weeks before. We're gonna have 3 weeks of follow-up after that. And San Ramon itself is waiting for a refund from Q4 of last year. So it seems like for us, it's like doesn't seem the greatest time to have an increase when the foundation is not set so well.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you for joining us this evening. Yeah, I think what you're saying, or at least what I'm hearing, has been echoed by others here in the room from various farmers markets throughout the county. And it sounds like there's still some procedural and administrative efficiencies that can be gained, especially from a paperwork perspective. And I think, as I mentioned to Stacy and Doug, we'd certainly like to engage with you on that, and make it so that we're all working towards the same goal, which is to not overly burden you folks with paperwork, because all the paperwork that you give us, obviously, we then have to review as well. And maybe seeing how we can partner together to make that process a bit smoother, so that it's less of a burden on you, less of a burden on your vendors, as well as just improves the overall process. Like I said, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing that with us. And I know none of these increases are, none of them are welcome. Nobody wants to see their bill go up. Trying to make sure that we can continue to sustain the organization that we have and still provide the level of service that we do is what's necessitating a lot of these things. And so we're trying to smooth that out where possible. And we're looking at other alternatives, especially for small water systems. So there will be more to come on that. I think what ultimately we take to the board in late May is going to comprise a lot of the stuff that we're hearing from this public fee or proposed fee workshop, in addition to all the comments that we've received thus far. I would encourage those of you, especially those of you that have a lot of vendors, to take the remaining time within this 30-day public comment period to provide that information to us. If it's something that is going to overly impact their business or going to cause them to get out of the field entirely, we want to know that.
That's only 4 days. Can we have it extended? Can you comment on that?
We'll definitely look into that. I know that we set this 30-day public comment period, mirroring what other folks have done, not only in other jurisdictions, but also in our own. Our hazmat division recently went through a fee revision, and they did something very similar. So we're trying to follow a certain, set process. There is, I think what we're trying to do is allow for opportunity to give us feedback, and especially in relation to markets. I think you guys know them best. You know what's going to really affect the consumers or your vendors, excuse me. And I think I've certainly heard that today from all of you that have shared. So I think it's one thing that I don't know that we're really looking at extending the period any longer, but we'll certainly have some internal conversations and see if that makes sense. And then if it does change, we will certainly let everyone know. It'll be posted on our website. There will be an email that goes out. And like I said, when we do eventually go to our board with whatever it is going to be proposed, we will let everyone know. We plan to send out emails, we plan to post it on our website. It will also be noticed on the board's own website where they post agendas. I think it'll be noticed in a newspaper, because it does have to follow certain requirements. But we'll try to let you know to the best of our ability when that's going to be. And again, that will be another opportunity to voice opposition, concern, whatever it might be, directly to the decision makers at that particular time. And I would encourage anybody that that is in that boat and that wants to do that, to do that. Also, even in the intervening period, after the public comment period ends, there's nothing to state that you can't go to your local elected official and make the same, comments, address concerns even before the public hearing. And I encourage everyone to do that. We try to actively engage with each Board of Supervisor member. They engage with us and they let us know when there are comments and concerns that come in. And so we want to address those to the best of our ability before we get to the point where we have to have that public hearing. But we also welcome the comments then too. Are there any other comments online?
We had a few under the Q&A section, but you answered them live. The only other set is from Patrick Riley, and I'll go ahead and read them.
Yeah, if you could read that, that'd be great.
It's about small water systems again.
Mhm.
Small water system here, our annual license fee will rise from $13.92 to $38.67. Our reporting to the state regarding operations and details have quadrupled. This information is sent to CC Health, which should have decreased their workload to administer our facility. How is an increase of 280% justified as an administrative labor cost? How can this increase can be justified without any details?
Yeah, and I think it's more of the same. That is one of the categories, as I've mentioned, that is going up the most. You're 280% there. I think we're at 350% from the gentleman that was calling in online. Also from the room, things also going up. And I think, again, what I can say to that is just to reiterate that we are looking at all possible avenues, which even means no longer regulating it here locally, meaning you wouldn't have to pay those fees. Ultimately, that is not necessarily a decision that's up to me. That's going to be up to direction that I receive from our board in how we want to handle this program moving forward, which might mean we don't handle it here any longer. But that's going to be certainly a part of the proposal and the package that's going to go before our board, hopefully sometime in late May. And it may address exactly what we've all been talking about, those large increases for each of our small water system owners and operators.
And that's it.
Yeah, I think your hand was up way before and I didn't call on you, so go
I
ahead.
just want to reemphasize that for categories that don't get routine inspections.
Yeah.
There's no apparent service that we get. And for my CFO permit, the renewal fee is almost as much as the initial fee. And all that you have to do is have the computer print a letter asking for the payment. And so that shouldn't be any significant staff time at all. So I don't know that you have any big regulatory reporting you have to do to the state for CFOs. So I'm at a loss for why your staff is spending so much time mailing a letter.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think that's something that we heard from the small water system operators too, that there's no visible benefit that you're seeing. Again, what I can say to that is there is stuff that's happening here. It may not be visible to you, but it is happening behind the scenes to facilitate the program and administer the program. And so that's what's necessitating the increase in fees. I'd be more than happy to sit down with you outside of this and we can discuss your particular situation and let you know exactly what's involved in all of that to hopefully help articulate that. But I think that's the best I have at this particular point. Thank you. And then I think I saw Stacy's hand first and then Doug's hand second.
Now that I understand the chart a little bit better and that basically the non-ag annual fee that we've been paying is now going to look a little different with the tip event application, really, right? We're gonna really, because that's inflated a lot from 45 to 282. So that's kind of in there. So these fees for prepackaged vendors, which is $64 down to $38, depending on the size of your market. I just want to point out too, like, it's always kind of felt, I appreciate the discount. I don't want to lose that at my larger market because I'm paying for more vendors, but it actually hits my smaller markets harder, right? So when I have this teeny tiny market that's a neighborhood market that serves, the community, truly the neighborhood, right? And in large part seniors that are on low income. Then my prepackaged vendors who are not getting the foot traffic that they're getting at my bigger market, they're paying, $64 now, when before they paid nothing. My question is, how are you handling or can we have a discussion around layered permits, right? So if I have someone who sells granola wholesale and they have a state issued PFR and they're not sampling, they're just selling their granola, they're already permitted. Do you even have to spend time on that vendor? I mean, they're already permitted by the state. So if they have a PFR, would they be exempt from the TFF process as they've been in the past? Well, they were in the past for other reasons, but the point being, I mean, they're already permitted by the state. So
Right.
doesn't that permit, that PFR, supersede anything else? I mean, does the inspector have to inspect a booth and look at what they've,
Right.
we've already maybe provided a copy of the PFR, or they can just look at the PFR and there's bags of granola on the table.
Yeah.
Can they be exempt from the TFF process so that we're not layering on permits? In the last presentation we had, there was just for farmers market and flea market operators, I believe, there was a PowerPoint presentation, and this came up, and one of the things that was said was if someone is a CFO and they're not sampling at the market, they wouldn't have to have a TFF.
Right.
Will that also be true for people who hold other permits like PFRs?
Right. And you'll have to forgive me, I don't know the intricacies of this program as well as the folks that provided you the presentation
And
before.
there are many intricacies.
Yeah, and so I don't actually have an answer to that directly. What I can say is we've noted that down. And we will have probably either Michelle and or Nicole reach out to you with an answer to that. Because they're going to be the ones that are probably going to be the best. They're going to have the best chance at giving you the correct answer to that, rather than me misspeaking and telling you something that may or may not be true. I'd rather you have the correct answer than me just give you some misinformation.
That's fair.
But we'll make sure to do that. And then I think that,
Could be a 2-pointer.
okay,
When your inspector comes out on a Saturday or a Sunday, are they paid 1.5 or more than their normal amount?
1.5.
Number 2, this could save us millions. Millions. How can we not do that? How can we, like, once a month or something, hey, your week this week is Wednesday through Sunday, you're off Monday and Tuesday, like the real world does, like my staff and everybody else who works different things. Is there, what's on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being possible, 1 being forget it?
Oh boy, that's a tough one to answer. I think I'll answer it like this, and that is one of the things that is both benefit to the employees that work here, and that also is something that we have to navigate here from an administrative perspective, are unions. So all of our employees, for the most part, are unionized, and they have contracts, and those contracts specify what they get and what they don't get. One of those is the overtime at 1.5, and on holiday, I will say it goes up to 2 for when things happen, like, things that we have to respond to that are emergencies. I won't get into the details, but that's all laid out in those contracts, and we have to follow them as an employer. So the only way to change that is to get those contracts renegotiated. And what I can tell you is that
It's not gonna happen.
That's
we
a
are,
one.
while it would be an incentivization for us as a business to do that, it's certainly not an incentivization for the employee to let go of that, because that is a requirement that we have. What I can say, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the TFF fees that you charge, or the farmers market fees that you charge, we understand that some of these markets and some of these events, whether it's at a farmers market or somewhere else, they oftentimes happen after hours. And so some of what you're seeing in that fee is not necessarily the straight time when we're doing things at, a business hour, but it's trying to cover all of the costs to administer that particular program, some of which happens after hours. And so while we're not charging you sort of an overtime, there's not like we don't want to have an overly complicated, because I get that it's already complicated, but we wouldn't want to have sort of here's all your TFF fees for business hours and here's all your TFF fees for after hours. those, as we talked about before, kind of all get averaged in, which is why you're seeing some of those costs maybe rise a little bit higher than would be preferable, but that's all part of it. I'm not necessarily going to put it on a scale, but I would say based on the laughter of the room, you're probably right. It's unlikely. And did that answer your question? Okay.
It's more of a comment.
Believe me, there's things that we struggle with here, and I think they're some of the same things that you're probably thinking of too. And it's interesting. Okay. If there's no other questions or comments, we still have a little bit of time left, so you're more than welcome. Like I said, I'll be staying here for a little while longer. If you have specific questions about your specific facilities, markets, vendors, whatever it might be, more than happy to address it. I will say, and I'm not an expert in all of the fields here, we have a lot of very intelligent and knowledgeable staff that do the work for us here. And so if there are questions that we can't answer, we'd certainly like to take that question down if it happens afterwards, and then we'll get that to the right person so that you can get your questions answered. But I really appreciate all of you attending. I really appreciate everyone online that has stayed and asked questions and also attended. So thank you very, very much. The public comment period is still ongoing for a few more days till the end of the month. I encourage anybody that has any more comments, any questions. We intend to, in case you did submit a question to us, we are going to respond to all those questions. We're again just waiting until we get everything so that we can batch some of those answers. That way everybody gets a similar response. But that is part of the plan. And we hope to do that soon after the public comment period ends. But with that, everyone is free to go, and I really appreciate your time and your comments that you shared with us here today. So thank you.